Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting of the Bedford Town Finance Committee to order on February 5th, 2026 at 7:02 p.m. First order of business is public comment. Is there anyone in the room? Yes, sir. Would you please come up here, name and address, and speak into the microphone? And I'd remind everyone to speak into the microphone. It's much easier for Rihanna to take minutes.
My name is David Williams. I live at 17 School Ave.
Thank you.
I just have a couple of questions, and I'm not sure whether...
This is not interactive. This is you may make a statement.
Okay. In that case, I'll say I'm a volunteer at the COA, and I see that the one of two budget items where there is a decrease is the Council on Aging, and well, since I can't ask questions, I can only make a statement.
This is a statement portion only. Yes, sorry. That's the way. That treats everyone fairly.
Okay. Anyway, I think it's a bad idea. I think there's a lot of, I think 25% of the town is over 60, and I think it's a great resource, and I don't think the budget should be reduced like that. That's pretty much all I have to say.
Okay. Well,
Oh, you know, there's one other thing, which is I also think, I see that the handicap van hasn't been approved for a while now, and I think that'd be a good idea.
okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Ben, I've just promoted Karen to a panelist here. May I suggest we do a roll call vote?
Now we have it. That's just what came to my mind. So, who's here this evening? George.
Here.
Karen.
Here.
Phil.
Here.
Ben. Here. Tom.
Here.
Alan.
Yep.
Mark.
Here.
Could you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you quite well. Can you not hear us?
No, I can't. Well, barely.
You know what,
It's probably because
moving
of
this
the
table
owl.
about 3 feet, because she's only getting audio from the owl, so if you don't mind.
No, I don't mind at all.
We've had to do this at select board meetings before, move this whole table up.
Can you hear us now, Karen?
Yeah, thank you.
Nice and cozy.
Nice and cozy.
We can also increase the input volume of the microphone. Karen, can you hear me?
Yes, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're great.
Yes, we can. I'm going to make one out of order comment because we have the time. If you wish to make a
Yeah,
comment
and I
later.
can't hear you now.
Can you hear me? I got the mic right in front of me.
I
She
think
can only hear
that
you
she
through
can
the
only
owl.
hear you through the owl.
So finally my big voice comes in handy. So I can make comments out of order if I have the desire and inclination to, and I do at the moment. I'll point out to the town manager, if you wish to address the COA issues that you heard earlier, feel free. It's entirely up to you.
Sure.
For a public comment, we don't do interactive. So,
I'll address it.
okay, thank you very much. That brings us to town manager and the chair of the select board for the town budget.
We do have a name tag for you.
Come and join us, Ms. Fidalgo.
All right. So, well, thank you for having us here this evening. And just before I start, you know, there's the non-discretionary budget line items in here, and you have a model discussion after the fact, and sometimes discussion about this and the non-discretionary might lead into the model. I'm happy to stay after for that as well, because I actually spent a little bit of time updating it today because we did get our Shawshene Tech numbers, which was one of our last largest unknown. So I'm happy to stay and talk about the model after as well. But if we could just, jumping right into the fiscal '27 budget, I know we gave you a lot of data, a lot of line items, but the really quick executive summary is that we've come in, I would say right at guideline, 25,828,000. It's about a 2% increase over fiscal year '26. In full transparency, it does have a reduction in free cash as part of that. That's a road maintenance budget.
But we still stay at no more than 50% of free cash, right?
Oh, yeah, the road maintenance, we had been spending 1.75 million, so we're proposing to just spend 1.6 million.
Okay.
Yeah, let's talk about the free cash
I
policy.
just want to make sure we're still
Yeah.
sticking with our policy in the end. I thought we were, because I thought the capital budget had come down tremendously, so
Sure.
I wasn't worried. I was just curious.
Yeah, no, we should be good with that policy. Yep. So if you weren't counting on that, we'd be at about 2.6%. It was tough, to come in at that level, to jump right in. Actually, before I talk about the COA position, I'll just say, we have 70 non-union staff. This budget does support a 2.5% cost of living adjustment for all of them. So we were committed to funding a fair cost of living adjustment despite the budget constraints. We do believe that's fair, and as we did last year, you may remember we moved some money into the merit line item, so I do have a little bit of money on top of the 2.5% for merit in addition to the cost of living adjustment. I'm going to go through a few notable changes. The last two things in my summary is just we made a sizable increase in the police overtime budget to help fill a really long-standing deficit that has been in that account for many years. And approximately 3 FTE positions across general government departments were eliminated as part of this budget.
You want questions as you go or at the end?
I think as we go, I'll kind of
It's
stop.
entirely up to you.
I don't mind, an interruption, just stop me. It might be easier so you don't forget.
So my only request to the committee will be, let's not do a chain of questions that lasts until 10 o'clock tonight on one item before we move to the next page.
Sure.
So,
No, I'm just going to give a few quick highlights. There weren't a lot of changes this year. Jumping right into the COA question, because I know that it's one that's come up a little bit. I just want to remind the board here that there are 4 or 5 departments that were impacted by the cuts. We asked all of the departments to take a close look at their budget. We asked our largest department, the school department, to take a close look at their budget. And we have half-time reductions in the Department of Public Works, the fire department, the town clerk's office, as well as the Council on Aging and the facilities department. So I just want to remind everyone, it's very easy to look at any one position in one department individually and say it's only $20,000 if we fund just that one position. But if we do that for one, I think in fairness, I would have 4 or 5 department heads at the next meeting saying, well, can I get my half-time position back as well? We take these cuts very seriously. It's not something we like to do. We did it in full faith that we have enough existing staff to continue to provide the same level of service despite the cuts. So I just want everyone to be confident that we are not going to be decreasing any services as part of these, relatively small reductions across the general government departments.
thank you.
Sure. A few notable changes in the select board budget. You'll notice we're not filling the salary position for the energy and sustainability manager this year. However, we are keeping a large portion of that salary in a consulting line item, specifically $60,000 for energy and sustainability consulting. The purpose for this is really twofold. It will give us access to that money during the course of the year if we do need to hire consultants while that position remains unfilled. And really, it was at the request of the Energy and Sustainability Committee and some other community members who wanted us to not lose the position within the budget, essentially. So we're reserving that money within the budget. However, as part of our overall, energy and sustainability plan, if you were following the select board meetings, we have made changes to several other job descriptions in order to absorb those existing duties. So between the consulting funds and the existing positions we have, we're very well positioned to continue to support our energy and sustainability goals.
So what's the interaction between that and the warrant article? Warrant
The
article,
citizen petition,
yeah.
um,
It sounds like you've addressed it, but
yeah, I strongly feel like it would probably be a moot point. I discussed with the select board that if, mid-year we decided to refill that position and we needed the money in the salary line, it could be with the understanding that the select board and the finance committee at the end of the year are gonna have to do a year-end transfer to just transfer it back from consulting back into salary. So the money is essentially in the budget, so in my opinion, that is a moot article.
okay, that's what I was expecting, but
Yeah. The moderator is, he's recommending that the only way to really withdraw it would be on the floor of town meeting. That would be his recommendation, if it were to be withdrawn at all. I suppose the article could pass, and that would force us to make tweaks to the budget to increase the salary line item in the select board account.
Or to indefinitely postpone,
Yeah.
if they were to suggest that.
okay. Yeah, I just saw the interaction and was curious where that was going, because it seemed like potential for mayhem.
Yeah, the proponent was following the discussions regarding the consultant, but hasn't gotten back to us specifically with their plans on town meeting floor yet.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not sure. Great. Small amount of the energy and sustainability manager's salary moved to the facilities department, as I said, as part of that transition of some of the duties of that position. Salary going away. The merit article is increased by $50,000. That is due to the fact that the cost of living adjustment of 2.5% is quite a bit lower than the average union increase we have this year, which is 3%. So adding a little bit more into the merit line item is going to allow us to still be fair to our non-union employees. But again, that 50,000 is all absorbed within the overall transitions and our 2.5% guideline.
This is the first year we're doing that, right, where merit is merit, and we don't have things hiding other places?
Last year was the first.
Was it the first? Okay.
Yeah.
I was just going to ask, how did it go? Is it a good thing to continue?
Yes, it has changed slightly again this year in a better way, because last year, even though we shifted the majority of the money into departments' budgets for the 2.5 or 3% cost of living adjustment, this year the merit, rather than being an article but still raised through the general fund, is just going to be in our department budget. So it'll just be a little bit cleaner from an accounting perspective and a warrant perspective. But practically, it's the same process as last year.
I just hear the questions at town meeting floor in my head.
Yeah.
Always, where possible, try and address them.
Trying to make it easier every
Yeah.
Thank you.
year.
So it's in the budget now, because we still had the small lingering problem where the budgets changed slightly after the year, the total dollar amounts, because the merit was a separate article. So the budget we approved at town meeting, and then the merit gets transferred during the year. The starting budget between like fiscal 26 and fiscal 27 is then different. So by just putting it in the town manager's budget, the numbers will, from 26 to
I
27.
completely agree. Many times I've taken our warrant and tried to figure out, because it has numbers in it, how come the numbers don't match
They
year to
don't
year?
match,
It makes
yeah.
me crazy.
No, we're trying to clean up a lot of that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, great. Just a few small things we'll highlight after this. Postage and auditing cost increase in the finance department. The explanation is the cost of postage and the audit. Nothing really fun. The fire department, as we noted, we had a part-time administrative reduction. And we also moved one lieutenant to the ambulance. This is to more accurately reflect the actual staffing of the apparatus. We're trying to run 2 ambulances as much as possible, and the revenue we've been receiving through the Ambulance Enterprise Fund can more than absorb an additional employee. So very simple change there.
So I have
Sure.
this is a type of change. In the text that shows up on different pages, like right now I'm on the Board of Assessors page, and it lists what they did, significant changes. The rightmost column has been completely cut off. So I don't know what you're going to do with this document in the future, but there's lots of words that aren't going to show up.
Oh, no, yeah, you don't have the clean version.
Okay, as long as you are aware that it's not clean.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, no, absolutely.
I can kind of guess what it's saying pretty accurately, but
This is
Okay.
between being the first year with this new budget book and then the finance director leaving, we've been,
Challenged?
challenged. But we do have a 98% cleaner version now, but I think next Monday we'll be ready to send out a refresher.
It's fine, I just was passing it along.
Sure. The ambulance looks like some large increases here, but this is really fully funded by the Ambulance Enterprise Fund. A portion of the fire admin salary, 50% of it will be covered under the ambulance. That's what we currently do for the fire chief. She will be taking on some administrative work for the ambulance as well. You can see the shift from the 1 lieutenant into the ambulance budget and the increase in the overtime budget for the ambulance. Again, this increase, we believe, will be covered by existing and future revenue increases due to staffing the ambulance more often. We did a quick analysis and we were losing approximately 100 trips per year for mutual aid coverage when we only had one ambulance in town. So by adding a little bit to the overtime budget in the ambulance, allowing them to hire a second person during their busier, what on average are their busier shifts, we'll be able to collect a lot of that revenue. Many ambulance transports are, $2,000 or more, so losing 100 transports a year is a lot of money.
I have to assume that the new fire station will help with the mechanics of diddling around with 2 ambulances.
They make it work now when they have the staffing. So I would say it's 90% a staffing issue, but sort of the convenience, it will be much cleaner and easier.
I think picking up those extra 100 trips would be great.
Yeah, so that's our goal. Public Works, as I noted in my opening, we're reducing $150,000. Our current pavement condition index is over 80, which is a very
Impressive.
impressive amount, compared to a lot of surrounding communities that may be in their 60s or 70s. So we believe that with the 1.6 million still remaining in the budget, we're going to be able to more than maintain our existing level. So no questions on that. Go to the Health Department. This is, I guess you would call one of our only actual increases is the $8,000 increase you see in the contractual services line item. This is because of a large contract increase last year. Our 1 FTE in-office therapist contracted position, we had to fill it with a 0.6 FTE therapist. This will allow us to get essentially 1 additional day per week of that therapist coming physically to Bedford to assist residents in need.
I look kind of fondly upon the Board of Health because of all the departments and all the budgets. They're one of the few that actually bring in a bunch of extra money by aggressive going in after grants. So,
They
They find
apply
it.
for everything. They do a great job applying for grants
yeah, they do.
and receiving them.
And I got to applaud that somehow, and
Yeah.
I look very fondly upon their budgets.
No, I appreciate you recognizing that. I'm sure I'll let them know tomorrow.
Thank you.
The IT budget, it's really a $0 change, but I still just wanted to highlight the fact that there were changes. Those of you who've been around a little bit longer will remember for a few years now, we had some increases in that budget when we took on Munis. But that's because we were carrying 2 financial software systems.
So now we're down to the, and I don't, Amy, you'll know the number, I don't remember the, is it 20,000 or 200,000 for the year by year?
It's about 270, but we ditched the previous system, so that was to be expected in terms of Munis, maintaining Munis.
Do we have everything we needed from the previous system? Because that was putting the fear into a lot of people that we might lose data that we needed.
Yeah, maintaining all of the data that we needed, which was necessary from a historical standpoint, so.
So now we're down to 270 something a year
Yeah,
for the
yep,
near-term future.
yes, exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Great. So just want to note that even though we had several IT increases this year, they were absorbed due to the reduction in the software going away. So very good news there. We are also adding a dedicated fiber ISP for the Bedford School Department. So if there's ever an issue with the town side internet, it won't wipe out the schools as well and vice versa.
Those are separate independent rings?
That's my understanding.
Okay,
Non-IT
just curious.
understanding. It's separate, that means good.
Does mean good.
Redundancy. for $7,000 to not have the schools go out, it really was a no-brainer because everything is run on the internet, by and large. I don't want to say everything, but a lot more than many years ago. Their Google platforms, their Chromebooks and things like that, so.
And we're down from having several hundred telephone lines,
Right, everything is, yeah,
much better now.
internet now. Elections, we're going from 1 election to 3 elections, so there's an increase there. Those of you who've, been on the board for many years, remember that goes, ebbs and flows pretty significantly every year. So from a percentage basis, it looks big, but it's really small dollars. Police department, I mentioned in my opening, we're covering that overtime gap that has existed for a number of years.
And what does that do going forward, that gap? Does it shrink down and never come back? Does it come back?
I don't expect the overtime budget to ever significantly go down. We had some really bad years where at our peak before I started where we were down, I believe, 8 officers. There was a lot of retirements. We've come back to where we're trying to always actively fill and never be down more than 1 or 2. We have a few going to the academy, leave this month or next month, and 1 more slated for a June academy. So we have 1 other vacancy, and we're currently, just yesterday, we posted for lateral transfers. We'd love to fill it with somebody who's already a sitting certified officer in another community. So we're in a really good spot, but we were in the same position last year where we hired, I believe, 4 additional officers, but the majority of the year they were in the academy and field training. So we continued to have overtime.
Right.
Due to that, we're in the same position this year with 3 more officers and 1 vacancy. So we've caught up a little bit from the peak of the reductions, but I wouldn't hold my breath for a large reduction in the OT budget. There's always going to be something that happens, somebody retires, or an injury that happens, something that affects that line item.
Okay, I was just curious. I know it was a point of interest in previous years as the chief wanted so many more people and you were trying to figure out a way to keep them happy without breaking the budget.
Every new officer does offset some overtime costs for missed shifts, but every officer is almost essentially, use the word, sort of guaranteed a certain amount of overtime just due to mandatory training that they have to go to and things like that. So that does offset a big chunk of the savings due to having those extra folks available.
We're making
to cover
progress.
shift. Yes, oh, definitely,
Okay.
definitely. It is much better, the biggest thing really outside of just the overtime is the staff morale, not having to order folks in. I think that was a real problem back when they had their peak of 7 or 8 vacancies, a lot of order-ins.
Yeah, I do remember hearing that.
Yeah. Due to the budget constraints this year, just wanted to highlight, we did have additional, I'll call them sort of longstanding requests for additional positions. Obviously, police, fire, council on aging, vehicle was mentioned. That's partially related to a grant that we've been applying for and haven't received, so that's not fully on the town for not funding that.
So you ticked off something in my head, and this is sort of a touchy subject, I guess, but do the employees of the town understand that it's not that we're trying to be punitive by having guidelines so low, but that we just don't have the money anymore?
So whenever I have the opportunity to, we try to explain that to employees, certainly explain that to the department heads. And this year, I said it at the select board budget hearing, I should have started by saying it here. This was a very, in my opinion, and Amy was at all the budget meetings, a cooperative budgeting process with our department heads. We asked them probably 2 or 3 months in a row at department head meetings as we started even thinking about the budget season, that it was going to be a tight year, start thinking about making cuts. Paul Sagarino, our last finance director, asked them to go through scenarios in their head. What would you do if, not only a 0, what would you do if you had to cut back 5%? So he wanted them to get in that mindset. We let them know that we are much closer to the levy limit than we were a few years ago. We've done some big projects. There were some big health insurance increases in the fire station. So a lot of departments came in with, ideas on where they could trim back. And when we talked about having to have some of those reductions in some of the part-time to make.
Okay, so it sounds very cooperative, which makes me
Yeah.
happy. I mean, none of us really wants to trim budgets, but
Right.
you get what you get.
Yeah, so the additional, I call them unfunded requests, are not really unfunded request because they didn't put the request forward. Their needs in the town, but not something that we felt comfortable putting forward when we knew they weren't going to be able to make it within the 2.5 guideline.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for the diversion.
Yeah. No, but I know you have sort of every line item. Happy to answer big picture questions, line item questions, and then, like I said, I'll stay for the model discussion after as well.
So the only other question I still had was, it looks like you made up for a lot of spending in place A by taking some out of place B. And one of the place Bs, the DPW, was it my imagination, or did they go down a lot this year?
Yeah, yes, I think a big piece of that was incorporating road paving into their budget and then reducing that by the $150,000. And then in addition to that, there was some large reductions in the water department as well. We're in the process of being reassessed for how our rate comes from the MWRA due to, I think, our connection, our volume, and our time in the system. So we're confident we're going to be getting a lower, categorized at a lower rate, and that saved a few $100,000 this year.
The DPW is hard because it's so many individual sub-departments. But I did see a trend at one point. Everything kept being much lower than I thought it would be for an increase, and I figured I should ask.
We found some ways. I think, Phil, did you have a question?
I'm looking at your scorecard because that was a very helpful
Yes.
way to summarize it. That's what's driving the 8.5% reduction on water usage. Is just a kind of a renegotiation, so to speak, of our rate.
Predominantly, I do believe David also looked at our trends for this year and the last few years, and somehow the expectations for what the summer's going to look like, and yard watering is a big impact on that. But his projections, along with the rate change,
Okay.
yeah.
You guys have any other questions? Do you want me to go around, or do you just want to take them? Go for it.
Thank you for your rigor in this process and the level of transparency and detail that you provided. I believe you when you say that these processes were cooperative. It's still uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I think we all know the reason why those came out really well, and she's sitting right there. Amy is just like the right person to drive that message home with holding a firm line, but also with a great deal of empathy. We're lucky to have her.
Absolutely.
I just had two questions.
That's Ben Thomas's line. You can't say that.
And I stand by it.
Two questions on Council of Aging. The vehicle that you just mentioned, the unfunded, what is the current utilization? How is that trending, and what impact is there on actual service of not getting that vehicle this year?
Sure. So it's a new service. I would say they're looking to add. So we currently do still have the BLT, but it's basically limited in the additional services that it can provide and the length of travel that it can provide is my basic understanding. So if we could get a state grant to help offset some of the salary, and we just had to pay for a vehicle and benefits, it's something we could strongly consider as a town. The grant isn't quite as fully encompassing as some others that we'd like. So we're actually just looking to increase the services there. It's not a reduction from what we have now.
Okay. And I imagine just like out of districts, so for kids who need it, that's a victim of inflation in terms of the cost.
Sure.
Anyway, so I noticed what reduction there was in the Council of Aging was associated with salary. Yes. Can you speak to, I think you mentioned it very briefly at the beginning, but can you say more about what where those hours came from and what, if any, impact they have on the level of service being provided? Second, the public speaker's comment on the treasure that our population of that age represents here and wanting to take care of.
Yes, there's basically two sort of buckets, if you will, of part-time staff at the COA. One was a part-time administrative staff during the week, and then part-time staff who cover their Saturday hours. The Saturday hours and the programming and that is not changing. The part-time administrative staff that was there you know, a few hours a day, each day during the week. That's what we're proposing to eliminate. However, there are 4 additional FTE positions in the Council on Aging, Monday through Friday currently as well. So that's why I mentioned at the beginning, you know, I don't want seniors to feel like with this small reduction, they're gonna go in and see an empty COA. They have a director, full-time social worker, which we're in the process of filling right now, but it's still budgeted in this budget, a program coordinator / administrator person, and just a full-time administrative assistant person. So there should still be, unless people are sick or vacation, at least 2 people near out the front, and Allison and a social worker in the back, and then, you know, their volunteers and all the other folks around. So I think it's still gonna be robust and have great services.
Yeah.
No problem.
All set? Alan?
Very clear, very straightforward, and thank you.
Thanks, Al.
Tom?
I agree. Thanks for all the detail as usual, Amy, Matt. The only question I had was the free cash usage. How much was that? 1.6 or?
It'll be 1.6, it was 1.75 last year.
Okay, I got you.
Yeah. 1.6.
Actually, before I forget, can I jump in here for a second?
Yeah.
Do we have the certified number yet?
I don't know, in front of you, it's just over 15 million. Did you have?
I don't have it.
It doesn't need to be
Yeah.
exact, we hadn't had it for a variety of reasons. I just was curious if it came in.
Sorry, or I know the number, I can send you what we have, whether it's an estimate. I feel like it was certified, I'm surprised we didn't send it out to you, but maybe with the finance director transition, he would have normally sent that to you, but we have it.
It has been a little confusing.
I know we were waiting on it from the assistant this week.
Well, let me ask the question I really care about. Does it leave at 50% total spend and all the draws on it? Is there enough for capital?
Oh, yeah, I think as far as we're concerned, like, everything was still on track to
Okay,
fulfill all
so we're not
the
straining
plans.
because of the new number. Okay, thank you. That's
As
really
far
what I
as we're
want to know.
considered, I think we're still on track for everything we were planning for this year.
One bright shining piece of light.
Yeah, came in as expected.
We would certainly let you know if anything changes with that, yeah.
Thank you. Tom, sorry for interrupting.
That's right. Oh, for the warrant, is there anything in there that we have to compensate for? Like citizens petitions or anything that we use free cash?
Sure. This year, there'll be a few, maybe we can put together a little slide for you. The big one I can think of right now is $300,000, the request from the school department to go into the special ed stabilization fund. Then there will be a big chunk of free cash for the capital plan. As far as additional standalone articles, the audit won't be on there anymore, the merit won't be on there anymore. The last one will just be $10,000 or $15,000 for the 300th committee. As of right now, I
Okay.
believe that's the last one.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah.
So following up on the free cash, I didn't understand that. You said we're using 1.6 million of it for, I guess, for roads, or what
Yes.
was it? Okay. And that was 1.75 last year.
Correct.
And on here, on the scorecard, you talk about 150,000 free cash reduction for paving, so that's what that's in regards to. I got it. Okay. Just a few quick questions. Thank you so much for pulling this together, and particularly the scorecard was immensely helpful as opposed to like trying to capture it all going through the 100 and some page document. So
Paul, that was Paul Sagarino's idea, but I loved it too, and you showed it to us, so it's,
I just
Yeah.
have to read all those pages?
it's great. It allowed me to focus the pages that I read.
yeah.
So, first on this is just, you mentioned we were kind of in a state where nobody was asking for extra because we were in a cut mode, which makes a lot of sense. But just as you talk to the department heads and so forth about, you know, what are the things they're thinking about and so forth, is there anything you see that, like, is going to kind of catch up with us as we go into next year or the next year that is going to kind of be that unmet need that kind of continues to build and grow over time, that's all of a sudden going to be something we have to have and a bit of a surprise in terms of growth?
You know, honestly, and Amy, I'll let you chime in as well, nothing in particular comes to mind as far as, you know, something brewing that we're shortchanging now that's going to come back to bite us later, I think is what you're really concerned about. We're going to continue to have, you know, departments advocating for some expansion in different areas. You know, I know police, COA Health, they definitely have some ideas, and if they could get an extra position to work on a few things, they could. As far as our core functions and services, though, this budget and, next year, I'm confident we're gonna be able to maintain, what we have. There's a few sort of lingering things in town that are a little bit of an unknown that could be some costs. The food bank, more so like relocating of the food bank. One of the other big potential cost ones, the other one that comes to mind is the fire station reuse. We just got a proposal I'll be sharing with the select board in their meeting in 2 weeks from, a consultant to help us out with that process. But, if there were to be some new programming or something that would go in there, I know there's been ideas in the community, and not to jump the gun at all, I don't want to kind of get ahead of ourselves by even really talking about them or advocating for them, but there's been some ideas in the community. Most of them would require an additional full-time staff person and/or a sizable capital investment. So what we do with the fire station is probably going to be our next biggest ticket item that is probably going to have some operating costs baked in with whatever we do with that building. But Amy, do you want to add?
Yeah, no, I think people have been very respectful and kind of came into the budget need to operate, and I've done my research. In a perfect world, I would love X. I've done my research, here is this, but I understand that this isn't the year to ask for it, and down the road we can discuss this, once we talk about the future of the food bank, or the future of 55 the Great Road, or once we have public hearings about where Bedford TV, or Old Town Hall, or the future of 50, let's talk about it. But they understand that it might not be the year to talk about all of those expansion opportunities. So they're presenting Matt, kind of the beginning of their research, but they understand that it's kind of just, we're thinking about it, we're looking at it, we would love to have that, but we get that it's not a full ask. So they know it might not necessarily be presented as a complete contingency request, because it really wouldn't be appropriate for their department to fully present it as like we really need this, because they wouldn't really be able to justify it for a few years.
Makes sense.
I have one big worry that falls into this bucket that you're exploring, and that is the growth of this town with the utility infrastructure that we have. I worry about water infrastructure, I worry about sewer infrastructure, I worry about all those things, because if any of those hits, it will be very expensive. And we're putting up lots of new housing with lots of people. That's my voice of doom for them tonight.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reality there. We have a little bit more flexibility as a town in that regard, because, we can set water and sewer rates, and, we can bond those projects and make those upgrades, but they are costly. Water and sewer improvements, pump station improvements, and then the maintenance of them on long term.
And then there's the stuff happens thing, like the 20-inch forced sewer main that blew out one year. That was large and expensive. You remember that. That was large and expensive. Luckily, it was in Lexington.
Well, one more thing. It's not immediate, but I am on the PEG working group, which is a group from the Community Media Committee and has a little bit of representation from the schools in this committee. We've done a little assessment they'll be discussing at their next working group meeting. They have about 4 years, it looks like, based on current trends, before they'll run out of money, and then at that point there'd be about a $90,000 gap based on our current estimates. They have about $200,000 remaining this year, but the trend is really...
But it's been as plain as the nose on our faces for the last 10 years, so...
So, as a member of that committee, though, it's my job. One of the big purposes of the committee is to start getting people to understand, that we're talking about that as a community, and when it comes to 3 or 4 years from now, are we going to absorb them in and keep them same level of services, or are we going to have to cut some
Right.
services back?
I've been kind of waving some of those flags, as you know, for a few years, but so what are we going to do? How are we going to do it? Paul knows it, because I won't shut up about it.
That's true.
But, 3 to 4 years out, so
Yeah.
it's not immediate.
Ben, just as a quick point of order, Vincent has joined us on Zoom as a panelist.
Oh, okay, I didn't see that. Last time I looked, he wasn't on. Is that recent, or?
It is.
Good evening, Vincent. Nice to have you with us.
Sorry about that, John, 15 minutes late. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, yeah.
Phil was asking questions.
Okay, so, yeah, thanks for the scoreboard, just to try to catch up, you know, kind of the content. I think hopefully I get a rough idea.
We should let, Vincent,
Let me know.
Vincent, we should let Phil finish up his questions and then I can call on you, okay?
Okay, so.
Thank you.
Oh, wait, is that right?
Yes, please. We're going around the table. It's Phil's turn.
Oh, sounds good.
All right. You mentioned there's 3 total FTEs. Could you just kind of highlight, you mentioned there's the half from the Council on Aging. Where are the other 2.5 coming from?
Sure. Half COA, half fire, half town clerk, half facilities, and 1 in DPW.
And the half from facilities, is that part of the energy and sustainability, or is that
No.
kind of in addition to?
That's the one position that is a current vacant position. It's for a part-time vacant position. The other 4 positions currently have people in them. That's a painter position that
Got it.
we've been having trouble filling it anyways.
Got it. And then the half one from the fire is the one that you moved over to the ambulance enterprise fund, or is it in addition to that?
It was an actual half-time individual who was currently in fire, and so now the one admin in the office is going to be doing some ambulance and fire, and that employee was retired employee previously who came back for some part-time. We're just going to have the new full-time admin do all the administrative duties.
Got it. Okay. What percent of our total budget is FTEs?
I'm sorry?
Is FTEs. Like, I know the school always highlights it's about 85% of the budget's FTEs. Like, I'm sure it's probably far less on the town. but-
Almost everything's around 80%, but you can get a more accurate answer.
Yeah, the number gets really wonky if you include the DPW because water and sewer is, I think, $7 or $8 million. If you were to exclude that, we're probably more like 90% salaries. You know what, it wouldn't take us too long to look and figure that out, but it's a very high figure. And to that point, we don't have a lot of areas to cut that is not salary related.
So then how does that work if we're looking at, we've got a 2% increase, but we have a 2.5% COLA?
Some of the departments, a lot of it did come from some of our big line items. About $1 million in the IT budget is one of our other biggest expense categories, coming in flat this year. There's about 20 some odd grand there. A lot of it was savings in the DPW, and then a lot of it was savings in the fire department by more accurately accounting for staff under the ambulance enterprise fund. Freed up about $140,000.
So is it fair to say basically, like, we're flat everywhere except for salaries for the most part?
Yes.
Okay.
By and large.
Yeah. We started our budget process by Matt essentially having to tell people that, you know, we needed to essentially look at 2% or lower raises and kind of like looking at flat budgets and then only then kind of going up to 2.5%, you know, kind of building up from there. Because the salaries take up so much of our budgets.
Right.
So that's incredibly accurate. It is a huge part of our guideline. It eats up that such a significant amount.
It's also pretty standard. I don't think I've ever made a business budget that wasn't in the low 80%.
As an example, like the year we, you know, included like Munis modules and it became part of the IT budget, like having 100,000, 200,000, it was like all of a sudden the guideline, we were like, oh my gosh, what are we gonna do? Because, you know, you add a few $100,000, it's like, you know, that plus salaries, you're at your 2.5% as an example. But yes, it's a significant portion.
Got it. And then one of the things I noticed in the budget book as I was reading it was just from the assessors, they highlighted the need to really increase the overlay account this year. is that already taken into account with the estimates that we have in the, and I'm probably getting ahead of it, but in the model?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we have it, it was, I believe, 850 last year. We have $1 million in a non-discretionary going into OPEB, overlay this year.
Okay, so it went from 850 to 1 million. Okay. The other thing I noticed on Finance Committee, 750, looks like it's adding 750 to our,
Oh, that wasn't,
That was put in the reserve
not the intent, it
fund.
might be.
to be put in the reserve fund
That's
on,
the
in
reserve.
addition. Like, I couldn't tell if it was just 750, but it seemed like we were spending 750 for each year. So,
No,
like,
that's 750
maybe I
to the reserve
misunderstood.
fund, and it falls to free cash if we don't use it.
Yeah, I'll check the formatting. Certainly the intent and what we have budgeted is just a single $750,000
And that's
in that line.
because that's what it was last year.
Yeah,
well, that's what I mean. So we wouldn't be increasing that by 750. It's like, because I guess if we don't use the reserve fund, it goes to free cash and then you fund it again the next year. Okay, that answers that question.
The question you also want to ask is, who's the other big free cash user? OPEB.
What about
What
OPEB?
are we putting in for OPEB this year?
Probably I would assume we're putting in what the guideline?
yeah,
is,
guidelines
5%?
5%.
And we're able to make that okay?
Yes, so yeah, if you want to just have a quick guideline discussion, yeah, put 5% towards OPEB. The roads has, always been consistently one of the first things that gets funded, and then, sort of the remainder is to capital, and so, yeah, that's really
Well, it's easier now that we have the policies for it, but
yeah.
generally, I like to know.
And then I have several questions on the non-discretionary piece, but I'll save that for the model, so, but thank you.
George?
Thank you for the budget. I don't have anything else that other people haven't already covered, so thank you.
Karen, do you have any questions?
Not really, just a comment. I love the scorecard, so thank you again for putting that together. It's really helpful. And also just being really thoughtful about the tough decisions that you're making. To, I guess, accommodate changes and some flexibility here, I guess. And when there's this much sort of fixed staff costs, it's hard to find that flexibility, and it sounds like you're doing it. So thank you for that. That was all I had. Thanks.
Thanks,
Thank
Karen.
you. Vincent, do you have any questions about the budget presentation?
I just heard a few mention about it. If you had some question on the non-discretionary, but you said you save it for tomorrow, there's another session tomorrow?
No, just once we get to the, I was just saying, once we get to the model discussion, because that's kind of more related to the model.
Okay,
And that's next, I think,
Yeah.
on your
It
agenda.
is next, yeah.
Yeah.
okay. Oh, okay, great.
So-
I just, Monica, general comment, certainly appreciate actually, your eventually as it increases lower than the guideline with the effort. But then we look at the model, overall as a town, we are still over the 2.5 guideline at 3 point something, right? And school certainly went over, and another bigger piece is certainly the select board budget. And then I look at the non-discretionary section, it did an increase of 4.56%, right? And that's true, I think, for all other budgets, either more than non-discretion piece, have a huge increase, and other section actually is relatively better. But again, look at the different item on the non-discretionary, certainly all human related, it costs insurance, and benefit, it has the most increase, right?
Yes.
But at the end of the day, I'm just thinking everything related to headcounts, basically, in order for us, in general, for the town, really have a good control of the budget increase. And at the end of the day, I feel like just headcount in control. All other things, just like I said, all other expenditure except the salary increase are very much flat, right? Yeah. All the increases are very much increase the headcount. Basically, either a benefit increase or just headcount increase. So I just more general comments, like for, at the time, if we really want to put our budget under control, really, we need to look hard at all, like, headcounts on each different departments. That's more general comments, but certainly, like, the bigger two places, maybe we should look for 1 year here and another with the school department.
Okay, you all set there, Vincent?
I'm all set. Like, that's probably for finance committee, like, if we really wanted to eventually come back to 2.5%, from town point of view, we really have to, that's one big angle to look at it.
Okay, thank you. I had two more thoughts when you were talking about FTEs. You're gonna hate this because you've heard this a million times from me. Is there any thought given to taking a look at consolidating facilities across schools? And Paul's laughing.
Yeah, I've had several conversations with Ron about that. I think from a finance and accounting perspective, it seems to make a lot of sense. We don't believe that there would be a big headcount savings because they already work pretty collaboratively. Most of the staff are already assigned to a building, but if he does need, help from
Okay.
an electrician or a plumber, my understanding from Ron is that they cooperate and cover for each other. It's really just an accounting kind of nightmare where it's one town budget at the end of the day when it gets approved, but we're setting up to pay certain people, 30% of, this person's salary comes from a town account and 70% for the school. It's like, well, town meeting just gave 100% of that money. If they could just give it 100% to a facilities department for that person, it would be a little cleaner. And then with some shared positions, it can be difficult if I'm giving one raise to my non-discretionary folks of 2.5, and Cliff negotiates a 2% for his folks, those joint facilities folks, which one do they get? So those would be the small areas where it would kind of clean up if they were just their own department. But I don't think we would be able to shed any FTEs from the reduction.
Okay, there's always
The
cracks and gaps.
consolidation.
And then the second thing, this is for everybody. How do you like this format? I mean, everyone said good things about the scoreboard.
Scorecard's great.
Should we continue with this format going forward? I mean, we're gonna have a new finance director. He's gonna start with something. I happen to like the model, but that's just my opinion. So how do you guys feel about this way of doing the budget with the scorecard and the model and the pieces we had this year?
I'm loving all of it. I think the model is great because it projects out, and I think the scorecard gives you a really nice summary of all of the different departments, which was always, like, before trying to zoom through a 100-page document.
It had its challenges.
Tell them to keep everything.
Yeah.
I mean, it's possible the budget binder would be it would be nice to have as an Excel
Yeah.
rather than the PDF of the Excel. That might solve some of the, cut off text and things like that.
Well,
and allow
it's
us
not like
to zoom in more.
Anyone's in danger of us changing an Excel spreadsheet and having any real change
Could
in it.
never. We hate Excel.
So,
Yeah.
But beyond that, I would say repeat that I'm very pleased with the level of detail and transparency.
Some of
that's
that
been-
might be even how you were set up in Dropbox, so I can change that for you all, so.
yeah,
I know it's just a draft.
I don't think we're done with Dropbox yet.
Hmm?
I don't think we're done with Dropbox, but thank you for the things you've done so far, that, from my point
No,
of view.
yeah, but I'm saying if we convert everything to like editable Excels and, tell them to keep the format and then put everything in there and you can all edit things if you wanted to and go
Well,
forward.
actually, I just want to be able
But
to
if you wanted to
zoom and
save it to your
scroll and-
desktop and,
Yeah.
great.
Alan, Tom, what do you guys think?
I like the new format. It's much more useful. It's great.
Well, can we
I
count
agree.
upon your support to help convince the new finance director, if necessary, that this is exactly what everyone likes?
You used to have to look in like 2 or 3 places to really like find out what the DPW's budget was or some other department, and I
Then it was in
found it to
PDF.
be really difficult.
And then, I think the real test will also be when we make the final warrant.
Mm.
And I know Matt has only suffered through a couple warrants at this point, but there have been a few times where he's like, there's 18 spreadsheets to look through to get to the DPW's budget because there's just, numbers in 4 different places. So
Not all
hopefully
the,
we're getting better at that.
and not all the links are hooked up properly?
And this is an example of that. So
Yeah.
if we can simplify you know, where those spreadsheets are kind of focused, then.
Okay, well, I want you to get some real-time feedback on what the opinion is, and the opinion is 2 thumbs up, so
Okay.
thank you very much for all your efforts and your work.
Put it to the test at this annual town meeting.
Does the scorecard come directly out of Munis? It's like a report or something?
No, we generate that based on some simpler Excel sheets that we're using for department budgets right now that then get, the budgets from Excel can get uploaded into the budget book and into Munis. They should be able to, but there's still a little bit of, I don't call it manual work there to update the scorecard, but a lot of the other Excels on the back end that you're not seeing, we've cleaned up as well. You know, salaries and expenses used to be on separate spreadsheets and stuff. Now it's like one department Excel sheet for your department, period. So it does make it much easier to just link.
I see.
Yeah.
All right.
But in the grand scheme of, you know, Munis reporting, this is super easy to plug in from Munis, you know what I mean? From us, this is simple, so,
Well, that was the pot of gold at the end of the Munis Rainbow, wasn't it?
yeah. This is easy to
Reporting.
update.
It worked.
Yeah.
We spent money on something that worked.
Yeah.
Alert the media.
They won't believe us.
They won't.
Oh, it's, yeah, good.
Anyone have any other questions about budget or comments or anything? My intent was to vote on it next week, if you were wondering. I just wanted us to have the whole view of the whole budget before we started voting.
The
So,
question I had was, are we funding our reserve fund this year? with
that's the
750?
question Phil asked about the 750, the finance committee budget,
Yeah.
that's
Do you know how much
750.
we have in there?
I don't know the current number.
No, I
think you're
think
talking
he's
reserve
referring to the stabilization fund, right?
Stabilization was somewhere around 7 million something. It was well over the top.
I don't mean to assume, Tom, is that what you were referring
Do
to?
you mean
Well,
stabilization?
I'm just thinking,
always
if you don't
going?
need the 750, just take it out and someone else could use it.
It's free cash, there are limits on what you can do with it.
But what if we're not gonna fund it?
Well, then the only way to put money is by vote at town meeting. We'd have to have town meeting vote just before we needed it. If there's nothing there and we need it. And every year we do, that number isn't just made up. It's,
No, I know, I'm saying if we're not going to fund it, if we have a nice amount in there that we're happy with.
but the balance goes to 0 at the end of every fiscal year.
Oh, it does?
For the
Okay.
reserve fund, the finance committee
Okay.
reserve fund is free cash. It all falls to
I
free
see what you're
cash.
saying, okay.
Does that
I
make
thought we
sense?
were adding on top of it, but we're gonna get
That would be
back
the
to where we were.
stabilization fund, and that's already well over the top.
And we are not adding,
And we were because last year Dave was like adamant that we had to add to that or else we'd,
From a bonding rating.
from a bonding rating perspective, and
We hadn't done it the year before, had we?
no, well, we hadn't the year
Well,
before,
we put
right?
it- we put little amounts here and there.
So I just want to make sure, like, that's actually a good question, is like, is that something we need to do, or do you feel?
no, we have, we're gonna be scheduling a rating call in, March, like either the end of this month or early March for our upcoming, we're gonna do a bond anticipation note for the second half of the fire station before doing a permanent borrowing, but it's gonna be, a sizable ban, so we are gonna do a ratings call for that ban. They'll probably bring up our stabilization account, and I'll have the opportunity to ask them where we are now at, I think it's now closer to 8%.
It might be 8.
over
It was
guideline.
well over the 6%.
And see what they say. It might be a new person on the call who says, okay, 8%'s above your guideline, you're fine. They don't have a magic wand and they won't tell you a number that they want to see. But I can ask.
Dave gave me the number before he left, or maybe it was Paul gave it. One of them gave it to me. It was very healthy.
Yeah.
I'm sure our earnings this past year have been pretty decent as well. I haven't looked at the balance.
It was very
I
healthy.
don't know if you have, but I'm sure it's gone up quite a bit, more than the 2.5%, percent of our overall budget.
And to that point, we're like, for your budget for next year for debt service, you have 11.3 to 11.6. Is that, given we've got the second half of the fire station coming on, or is that because that'll hit in 28?
Yeah, the 11.6 is enough to incorporate the permanent borrowing for the fire station. I think we had the 11.6 actually budgeted for this year in case we decided to do the permanent borrowing this year. And speaking to our consultants, we're gonna do it next year, but let me just pull that debt service
So
up.
you're generating follow-on questions in my head, and they all have the number 10 in them.
Non-recurring debt service. Okay, yeah, so I have when you said next year, you meant fiscal 27.
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
So we are budgeting to take on the full fire station debt. I know it looks like how can you afford all of that with the 11.3, but we do have some debt dropping off.
Oh, is that what it is? So
That'll keep us below the
okay.
10% max.
Yeah, we're
Okay.
pretty lucky. Yeah, we are going to push, like I said, the permanent borrowing out one more year. We think, our consultants think rates are probably going to come down a little bit more, and then we actually have more debt dropping off in fiscal 28, so it'll be even easier to absorb that. The
We'll
following
find
year.
ways to spend it. We always do.
We won't have to though, so we're doing okay.
Okay.
It's fine.
Right. Sorry to
No.
left turn, but just
No, it's-
when you mentioned that, I was thinking about it. Okay.
Anything else from anybody? You want to look at the model now? I'll start.
Yeah. So I guess I'll start with the big change. I think your last update was a January 9th version. We just today received our Shawshene Tech budget numbers, which was one of our biggest unknowns. We received, I believe it was 8 additional students this year. So we went from 45 to 53. So that's a 22% increase. The overall tech school budget only went up by 2%, but Burlington had almost 30 student increase, so their budget went up 25%, and Bedford, ours went up 22%. The other communities were flat or went down, and it was purely a result of students shifting where the students are coming from. So that was a few $100,000. So I can draw your attention to that. That's under non-discretionary regional school assessment Shawshene. And then we also had a
That's
student.
line 131?
Oh, I don't have the line numbers on
Oh,
here.
sorry, okay.
Yeah, it went from 1,196,000 to 1,529,000. And then,
Yep.
Just a note on this, while we're on that topic, you had 0 for the audit while you're on
Yeah.
that section.
so I just, this is one of the things, well, I can double check this, and I was just working on this today. I believe the audit is in the finance department's budget this year, so it was being double counted in there.
Oh, it was, okay. Because it's on the scorecard, but it wasn't in the model.
Yeah, I literally just caught that today. So that freed up $90,000, but
Oh.
it was immediately eaten. I saw that at the same time when I had the $300,000 Shawshene increase.
You giveth and
Yeah.
taketh.
So I mean, I guess as a town, we can still consider that a non-discretionary account, but it did start to get confusing when some of these things were out of the budget. And the same thing happened with, utilities and water sewer. They're in the department's budget, but also non-discretionary.
Those were all done to solve other problems, so you should work with whoever you need to solve whatever problem's in front of you right now.
Yeah. So that's something that might need a little bit more figuring out how we want to display that. But in short, we want the non-discretionary items still in the department budgets because it's much cleaner from like a warrant perspective and from all the Excel sheets and the budget book perspective. But we want them to still be considered non-discretionary, so if the cost of water doubles one year, the DPW doesn't have to lay off half their people. So as a town, we'll consider them non-discretionary still, but some of these might not show up in the same
Well,
fashion.
that's how we got into having the non-discretionaries, the
Yeah.
size and the number that they are.
Yeah.
I think Sarah did some of that.
So we'll let's look at that. Sorry. So, in cherry sheet, or the initial cherry sheet numbers came in, but they almost came in right where we were estimating, so no real change there. I highlighted, it's page 2 on mine, the unused levy. This is the number you were seeing previously when you first started looking at the scorecard or the new model this year with the finance director. I added the second line underneath the unused levy excluding the use of free cash because the amount of excess levy we had was, in my opinion, artificially high because we're funding the road budget through free cash. So I want to be, us to be transparent about what our true levy limit is. Most towns don't count their levy limit based on any use of free cash. They look at it because, we could stop paving our roads for 1 or 2 years, but eventually we would start to have paving them again. So we shouldn't be relying on that when calculating our excess levy. But there are two schools of thought on that. So we have both numbers here. We are in good shape for fiscal '27. Again, $150,000 remaining, or $1.75 million if you include the free cash. When you go out next year, the numbers don't look so good. Again, they're conservative revenue and expense estimates, but even including the $1.6 million in free cash next year, we're estimating a $400,000 deficit. At this point, if nothing changed dramatically, I believe that between the town and the schools, we could find a way to absorb $400,000. So I don't think that would be override territory necessarily. The following year, $2 million, that would be pretty drastic.
First two you get for free.
That being said, as a community, what I would encourage you to consider is the true potential deficit next year, if you're not counting on that free cash, is close to $2 million. So the town could consider, I don't want to overspeak, but I would keep that in mind, that that $400,000 deficit is artificially low because of free cash. Kind of a scary place to be as a community. That's really the high level change. So we've plugged in the updated school numbers and the other numbers here. So I don't think much else has changed on the scorecard since the last time you reviewed it. Those are really the only changes, the Shawshene Tech numbers and some new numbers for unused levy.
So I know the answer, but I'm going to ask it anyhow. If we can look out with a telescope far enough ahead, and in this case we can look out through a couple years out, are there things we should be doing now or considering now to make sure the pain's less than? I mean, we know this is going to happen. It's like we put the brakes on a brick wall 3 feet before we get there rather than a mile before we get there.
I don't think they're doing that already.
I'm just wondering if there's anything, it's an open-ended question.
Yeah, there's quite a things. I mean, we have to socialize our true fiscal picture with all of our staff, with all of our unions. Much of our cost is salary related, as we've discussed. There are a few things that we can continue to look at from like a consolidation perspective and a regionalization perspective. There are opportunities, potentially to save a few $100,000 here and there. Debt service is one that many communities start to look at. I'm not suggesting it, Amy, because I know that's how we fund our capital project, but it tends to be one of the first ones that gets trimmed back when communities are considering, do we do an override or do we cut back on our capital program for a number of years? It's not sustainable long term, but it is something that in the short term, he said, well, if we just cut back on capital 1 year, we can push off an override an entire year. A lot of communities do that. Then like the second or third year, maybe something changed to the good. You had some new economic development or state aid or something. So a lot of communities will try to push off an override as long as possible. So we have several tools in our belt that we can consider.
Like I said, it was an open-ended question.
And we talked about it during the capital presentation, and Matt, all jokes aside, like 1 year with a dip at the capital plan is not going to help anything, right? Like what is going to help is a complete change in culture of we needed to kind of reassess and do a new fire station and address a new police station and do a few massive boiler reconstruction projects, but we now need to look at a $6 and $7 million capital bottom line budget for multiple years, and that's the new future for the next many years, and that's what you're going to see. That is the new future for the capital budget moving forward. That's a huge different reality for a lot of departments. That's the new norm. I think also to Matt's point, the new norm is for the staff culture to think about like union negotiations and staff to think about like what, you know, unfortunately, the like leaner budgets and those discussions during budget hearing times, like that's also the new norm. So it's all gonna kind of come up in different avenues during capital budgets, operating budgets. It's all going to be a discussion year over year. It's not just a one-time discussion. It's gonna be the new normal when we talk about operating budgets, capital budgets, school budgets. You know, everyone needs to be participating in
Right.
this
Okay, that's,
activity in order for it to be
that's
successful.
sort of along the same philosophy I see with our 50% free cash usage, which is, there's no crashes.
Right.
The brakes go on slowly, there's no or OPEB, which follows its own curve.
One other thing that we're considering, you know, we've started to discuss internally is, you know, utilizing an enterprise fund for water and sewer. They're predominantly fully funded right now, not town subsidized. But when they're in an enterprise fund, it's a little bit easier to track that and charge back the real true cost, including overhead and other things you can charge to the enterprise fund, which, you know, from a resident perspective, it's, you know, shifting it from taxes to water sewer fees. Again, not suggesting there would be any type of large shift if we did that, but fully capturing it could potentially, you know, create some hundreds of thousands of dollars. And, well, it would still be taxes residents are paying essentially through a fee. It could avoid an override vote, which are unpopular. So that's sort of a town decision you can make.
Is that,
Are we maximizing our fees before going the override route?
the thinking about it phase, or we could do this in 2 years phase, or we should do this next
Yeah.
year phase, or?
I think we were definitely moving forward next year if our finance director had stayed. Now with the new finance director coming on board, I'd still like to move forward next year, because even if you set up an enterprise fund next year, there's no requirement that we increase fees or add any additional cost into it, but it would give us an opportunity. to
Gives
do
you a
that.
tool in the
The
tool belt.
infrastructure could be there.
So, we'll like.
And that essentially allows you to, instead of just paying for water and sewer and then getting the fees, and you're matching the fees with the
Yeah.
water and sewer payments more closely, I guess.
Yeah, and it also keeps the money, the extra money, if there is money at the end of the year. Say you raise water, you know, user fees one year, and then it's a really wet summer. All that money is going to stay with the water enterprise fund to then fund the water capital, you know, purchases now. So now we have to try to, you know, we have to review what the overages are not were in water and sewer, and then, you know, make sure we're still applying to capital.
So right off the bat, 5-6 lines of David Manuvian's capital budget, you know, that are impacted by water and sewer could be,
Yeah.
you know, going towards that particular enterprise fund versus free cash, as an example.
Because you'd basically pay
Because
for
they
the
need
water,
an enterprise fund, right.
sewer pipes and things like that through capitalization through the water and sewer fund.
Would that be combined with more regular billing? I think it would be a little bit more palatable to the people.
Yeah, is your question to the fact that water and sewer bills aren't like, since they're not taxes, you can't like write them off and stuff like that? Could it be incorporated into your taxes?
I just think it would be more palatable to a lot of people, you know, if it was
Monthly.
split up a little bit more than every 6 months get a huge bill plus
Oh.
more.
You don't like the
Yeah, we are.
water bill around Christmas?
I love that, like December 17th getting.
We are going quarterly, right?
Yeah,
I thought
like
that's
meaning monthly.
I thought we-
versus-
Well, biannual
No,
right now.
I thought,
Right now, it's every 6 months.
yeah, if it's not, then I owe somebody some money.
Yeah, no, the pivoting to quarterly was the next phase of transitioning with the new software. So I think that was the phase of like quarterly and then additional software, and then the hope would be going to an enterprise fund. And I completely agree, which is if DPW can kind of transition everyone to feeling more confident and feeling like they completely understand how their water and sewer system is being billed, and they feel like they kind of have more control and more oversight.
Yep.
The hope would also be like, I have more understanding of how everything is functioning, and if something were to go wrong, and if I kind of can monitor it, maybe they feel like they have more buy-in and more understanding to.
You're already doing 13 cycles, right?
It's on it's rotating, so not everyone necessarily
Well,
understands.
there's a difference
that
between
it's-
collecting the data
Right.
and actually doing something with it, and I thought you'd already moved to the 13 cycle collection, so now it's just the mechanics of moving towards, I want to do quarterly billing, I want to do
Right.
monthly billing.
Right, so we are on a certain cycle, but it's not necessarily that customers are on a quarterly cycle. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, it makes sense,
Yeah.
although I'm on the same cycle he is, which is twice a year.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'll have to follow up with David on it. I mean,
Water is an endless hole, there's lots of details.
But I think that brings up a really interesting point, because when you look at how much capital goes to funding our water and sewer, I think if we could move toward that, while it, it's more of a shell game, and it's not like it's reducing fees and taxes for the townspeople, but I think what it does do is, if it allows us to shift out override, it helps us to an extent in terms of,
I assume there's nothing to attack in the fixed cost in the water and sewer management. There's a base level cost just to keep the lights on and the pumps running and.
Yeah, and not to, as a somewhat different topic, but like as an example, if we didn't have a pump station to fix in this upcoming year, the capital plan could have been reduced by
exactly.
$3 million.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean?
Because those are
Like, if
the
there's any given year that
massive
we don't
costs.
have a pump station, it could have just been a $3 million year versus a
Yeah.
$6 million. So, I mean, but I didn't mean to.
We have a lot of pump stations, don't we?
Unfortunately, we're very flat, so.
So, does anyone else have any more commentary on the model, what we do with the model, how we do this stuff with the model, or anything related to the model?
I have a couple of questions on non-discretionary. Just first being like, what's still up in the air that could change? Like, I'm looking at the fact that we have a 0% increase on utilities, and then 10% for insurance and wellness, which I'm assuming is just a placeholder. So I'm curious, kind of like, what's still up in the air, and what are the things that give you a little bit of heartburn as you look at this, given just how close we are on kind of everything?
sure. The last unknowns now are thankfully small ones. The utility line, even though it's flat, that's intentional on the facilities department's behalf. Between the estimated rate increases they're seeing for next year and the buffer that they had built in for this year, they actually requested the flat increase. So we're confident in that number. Health insurance, Middlesex, retirement, we're good. The general insurance flat, that is intentional as well. We had 3 really good years of not too many, water breaks in buildings and things like that, slips and falls. So for general insurances, we've been basically told to estimate flat this year.
So that's actually good news for next year,
Yeah.
because it's a 3-year running average, isn't it?
Yes, we did have some things this year, though, that have now come up that will probably hit us next
okay.
year.
And back on employee benefits, that always seems to come up right before town meeting, of like, oh, we got our numbers and they're higher than we expected, right?
Yeah.
That's happened like every year essentially. I've been on finance committee. So do we think that could happen this year, or do we think that 13% is?
We're estimating, I would say on the higher end this year. So, I mean, we have been given GIC estimates. Unless they sort of change those estimates, we should be okay. And then there is like at least one benefit eligible on the town side, and quite a handful of FTEs, actual real positions right now that are benefits eligible on the school side. So we're going to have a little bit of additional savings there just because of the headcount reduction.
Oh, right.
So we're going to be able to absorb a little bit more of a buffer there. Yeah. So the last one's Medicare, unemployment, life insurance, and wellness. We don't have those estimates yet. I'm not sure exactly when we get those, but they're relatively small amounts. The care assessment, I think, is based on our overall salaries, and with salaries going up so much in the school department this year, I think we can count on a pretty large increase there. Even if we drop that to 5%, maybe save $50,000, but I don't expect any big savings there. And unemployment, the 10% increase, I would keep that, because with the reductions in headcount in the schools, I do expect unemployment benefits are going to go up the beginning of next year quite significantly. So that might actually be one that it's really hard to track and predict, but that might be one that we actually go over next year, depending on how quickly some of those other folks that get laid off find jobs. So there's not much else that we're waiting on at this point. Shawsheen was.
That was
really the
unemployment
biggest-
you were just talking about?
Yeah, unemployment insurance.
That's flat 0% increase. It's
Oh,
life insurance that went up by 10.
123.
No, I have 10% here. Unemployment, 125 to 137.5.
Wow, I see 125, 125. I must be looking at the wrong spreadsheet.
Oh, you're looking at the scorecard, right? No,
Oh.
he's looking at the model now.
Ah, okay, sorry.
I'll make sure the scorecard is.
I was still looking at the scorecard.
Okay, so.
See, it's so useful, I just go there automatically.
Yeah. Okay, we'll fix that on the scorecard, see why that's not linking. Yeah, so as of today, I don't expect much additional movement on the non-discretionary.
What would moving town meeting actually accomplish here? Would it help? Would moving town meeting give you more certainty in some of these numbers?
Well, if we switch to the revenue side for a minute, the governor's budget, at least, traditionally the last handful of years, hasn't been terribly supportive of municipal governments. It's usually the House budgets that come a little bit later, that can give you some big increases. That can be a swing of a couple $100,000 one way or another. And when you're a town that's thinking, are we cutting, or, are we in override territory, that couple $100,000 can make a big difference. Some towns will still use the initial numbers from the governor because they're more conservative and nothing's guaranteed till the budget passes. So that's actually a good approach. But if we're in a pinch and we needed to put together a budget and we didn't want to make folks cut unnecessarily, waiting till you get, the House budget numbers or the Senate budget, could be better from a revenue perspective. It also would give us more on our local receipts. If we can look in January, we'll have full 6 months of local receipts and see where our meals and hotel taxes are and our excise tax. That could be the swing of a few $100,000 as well. When we started this budget process, I think when you put out your guideline, we only had 1 quarter of this year in.
Right.
Having that second quarter does make a big difference from looking at our local receipts.
What I hear in my head is the questions at town meeting, some of which didn't make any sense to me.
Yeah,
Actually, earlier was better because you knew less, which really made no sense to me at all.
I mean, the only pro I see is that it forces you to be more conservative because you don't have any information, but I like having 6 months of, revenue, 6 months of expenses for my current department. It's a little bit hard for us to budget our expenses for next year too, and we've only got a quarter of the way through the year. When I ask my departments to put their budget together, they've really only got a quarter of their bills for salary expenses in there. So it helps on the revenue side and the expense side, just to have that extra maybe, month or two.
I'm a believer in it, I just was checking that it still helped. Because you gotta stand up and present it.
Yeah, it'll be great fun.
Why do you think people are so resistant to it? We spent a lot of time discussing it. In my mind, I'd do it.
I think they were
I think
surprised.
there's a lot of benefits.
It's just change. I think that was the only thing I really heard is why it's not, maybe it's not broke, don't fix it. It's worked for however many years, but
For the record, it did pass. So I'm saying.
Honestly, I think that when it has a presentation and a little bit more socializing, I think it will be fine. I think it was just that it wasn't, I think that oftentimes it's like people just don't really pay attention until it's on the floor of town meeting and all of a
So
sudden.
this is basically the goof
it's-
we make every
This
few
is the
years.
first time I heard of this. Wait, no, I'm panicking. Wait, do I vote for this?
So if we presented a little better, I mean, we've been down this road before with, if we'd only presented a little bit better.
Right.
There was also a lot of opposition to being a special town meeting as opposed to annual town meeting.
Oh, yeah. Well, just think, this year, if I knew,
Paul will put on a
a
little
month
show
earlier
and-
that
Yeah.
this was gonna be flat versus a $250,000 increase, that could be the difference between, us cutting a position or two and the schools having to cut that extra 1 or 2 positions. Having some of these big numbers in end of January, early February.
Doesn't the timing work with the union negotiations too?
Yeah, it would give us more time with them, a little bit of extra time. Like we're currently meeting with Patrol, and we have almost like weekly back-to-back meetings to try to see if we're going to be able to get something in line for March. But most communities don't start negotiating that early, so we're kind of forced to negotiate only 2 years in instead of 2.5 years in. Now a month is only going to give us a month more leeway, but it does give us, more likelihood that more other communities are going to be settling around the same time. Sometimes what gets you over the edge, settling your negotiations, is a lot of communities are trying to get their contracts settled before going to town meeting. If you have the earliest town meeting, probably 5 of your 10 comps don't have a settled contract for the next year. But if you have that extra month or two, you can say, listen, 2 or 3 of our neighboring communities just settled at 2, 2, and 2, and we're offering you 2.5, 2.5, 2.5. You need to get away from the 3. We don't have good data for that.
And luckily in Bedford, it's common practice. What Matt and I can do is like put that warrant article on the actual warrant, and the union agrees that even if we're continuing to negotiate, we don't have to actually put the number of what we've settled for on the warrant, so we can continue negotiations and then bring the final, settled figure to town meeting as we actually go to print for the warrant. But it's not ideal. Of course, we would love to have the actual
Right.
settled figure.
So are you all set with model?
Set. Yeah.
George, you all set with model? Karen, questions, comments, suggestions about the model?
Nothing at this time, thank you.
Okay. Vincent, any comments, questions, suggestions about the model?
Nope, thanks.
Thank you, sir.
The what-if scenarios are really helpful.
As you can tell, we're just fascinated by what you do from day to day.
I like it too.
So with that being done, the next thing is minutes. Which minutes do we have on tap?
I think we just had one.
We might not stay for that vote if that's okay.
I can't imagine why you'd want to.
All right, thank you very much for your time.
And we'll
For your
say,
feedback.
Appreciate it.
for all of us, thank you for Rihanna's time. That's a great help to have somebody do the minutes.
It's good for her, it's good for you, we're excited about it. It's gonna be good for everybody.
I think so, I think so.
I'll listen in. If you have any feedback, I can pass along to Rihanna.
Well, she's listening because she asked me to make sure I read the
Oh.
times off.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure she heard my comments about how much we appreciate you, Amy.
Yeah, no, that doesn't need to be in the minutes, but she's doing phenomenal, so.
Sure it does. We can get it in there.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just saw a lot of audio issues. Was that you, Mark?
A lot of what?
Like it was changing speakers and things?
Oh, fun.
Vincent, Karen,
I think
can you
the
still hear us?
Owl died.
Yeah, I can still hear.
Okay,
Yeah, the town image is back. I
okay.
thought it all disappeared.
The owl is on its last legs.
We
Can't
should
hoot anymore.
throw some funding in for a new owl, I feel like. Or send it to Drumlin Farm for rehabilitation.
Well, I was less prepared than usual because I've been out sick all week and I was gone for 28 days before that on vacation. So at the moment, I don't know if we have any minutes to
We
look at.
do.
Where are they
They
hiding?
were done yesterday, I think.
They're in the,
When I took a quick look yesterday, I didn't think I saw any minutes in the Dropbox. Oh, there is a January 29th now.
Sorry, just to clarify, what is our free cash right now again?
I think they said it was going to come in around 15 million.
Right, but they were being cagey as to what the actual number is, because I don't know that the town manager is certain that it's, what he knows is a certified number.
And that's not in the model right now, right? Just to double check.
Well, I mean, that'll
The
come
road
in and go out,
Yeah,
right?
right now it's not. Right?
So I've reviewed the.
They don't
January
put the
29.
free cash in because it's kind of in and out.
So it's never been in the model? I thought
Well, it used to be in the model, but it was in the
Which of
revenue
at
and
least
the
the 5
cost.
different models I'm aware of,
Okay.
including the PDF one that you could never modify, and
Because it's not part of the recurring expenses, so that's why
So the free cash line item in this model, what does it represent?
I don't,
I'm not looking at it, so I don't know.
I think he just has
Oh,
it
there
as
it is,
zero
line
because he had
line
it as
34.
like,
The free cash I see on non-recurring revenue is a line
Yeah.
34.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
oh, okay, so he has it in.
Model's just operating expenses.
But I don't think it ties to
It
anything
doesn't tie
as
to
part
it.
of the
Okay, I see,
percentages.
all right. All right, that's because it's below the line. All right. It's below the, okay, I see.
What's our policy on free cash usage, 50%?
50%.
Total usage, 50%. That's why it isn't 50% for capital and 50% for FinCom reserve. It's 50% for the entire summation of usages.
Yeah, it's gonna be close.
Well, that's okay. If we didn't think that was a good number, we could have picked a better number. Plus, we can always change the number if we think we're making a mistake.
Yeah.
Anyhow, minutes. I think Mr. Bailey had started us down the path.
I have reviewed the January 29th minutes, and unless there's a need for discussion, I would happily move that we enter them into the record.
Is there a second?
Second,
Karen, the minutes of January 29th.
Yes,
Vincent,
Yes.
George,
Yes.
Phil,
yes.
Ben, yes. Tom,
Yes.
Alan,
Yep.
Mark.
Yes.
Thank you, guys. And it may seem weird that I voted for minutes I wasn't here for, but actually, when you're voting for minutes, you're only voting in the proper form and they look correct.
that's a long-standing rule.
Yep. Meetings attended. Karen, meetings.
Nope, nothing here.
Vincent,
Nope.
George,
Nope.
Phil.
So I was at that PEG access meeting, where we reviewed the, kind of the situation with cable revenues going down. It sounds like, just for this committee to know, it sounds like there is a potential legislative solution, that's made it farther along than ever before. You know, like all legislative solutions, we'll see if it gets through this session.
What are they
of-
proposing? Partial
basically-
payment, some payment?
No, basically using, putting a tax on streaming services. So essentially, instead of charging cable, you
How are you
charge
going to
streaming
do that?
services.
Talk about that later. I
I
can't imagine
don't-
how you do it.
I have no idea, and I did not ask.
Send a bill to
because
Palo
nor-
Alto and care of Facebook, send us money?
I mean, like, it's like everything else, right? It's like the state and local taxes, right? So, so anyway, they're hoping that would go through. If that doesn't go through, as Matt noted, basically about 2030, we'd be looking at probably a $75,000 to $100,000 deficit for Bedford TV. And so I think the discussion is, how do they start thinking about that? One is that they could be absorbed by the town, which would eliminate the rent, but then essentially the town is still taking a 30,000 hit because that's how much they pay
I've been
for.
asking for years, that you can do this, but what else are you
Yeah.
not gonna pay for?
And then there are other considerations too for like the town controlling Bedford TV from an aspect of liability in terms of free speech, in terms of things like that. So
Has your
I-
committee looked at what other communities do in
They-
that regard?
So Tewksbury has done that, and it is working well for them. I'm not sure about other committees, but
Just
that was the first discussion last night. So anyway, more to come. I think the plan is to start, as Matt will be coming to the next meeting, to talk a little bit more about it in terms of what we think about. The good thing is they're starting to think about it early on. And I think starting to highlight to the community the importance of the work that Bedford TV does, and if they went away, that we would probably still need the services, and it would cost quite a bit to get, you know, external freelancers to do the services that
Well-
Bedford TV does for far less, so.
I do a show once a month for them, but I can't tell you what the audience is. I think it's very small.
Well, I think it's less for Bedford Common and more for like,
Yeah.
you
Some of the
know,
other things I'm sure
accessibility
better.
for the select board, for the finance committee, for the
Yeah.
school committee, et cetera, that people, I think, and for, town meeting, et cetera, that the, kind of the town has somewhat come to rely on from a municipal perspective as well as for the schools, from the sporting events and things like
Right,
that.
right.
So I think there's public access and there's the programming associated with that, but then there's more the broader accessibility to town government and
Right.
activities
My
that
other
I
point
think
was you
is.
can't paint them all with the same brush when you decide who you're funding. Does audience matter? Does content matter? Does length matter?
I mean,
It gets interesting fast.
it becomes one of those things where you can either fund it or you don't have to, right? Like the cost is not Bedford Common, right? The cost is
Oh,
the
I agree. I agree.
services, so. Anyway, so that's where that is, so that's all I've got.
Okay, thank you. I was on vacation. Tom? Alan? Mark?
Oh, actually, I think I might want to talk more about that PEG meeting. We should keep this going.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? Karen?
I
Vincent?
Aye.
George? Phil?
Aye.
Ben, yes. Tom?
Aye.
Alan?
Yep.
Mark?
Yes.
Thank you guys very much.